Chapter 1. When Iris showed up at the entrance of my office building, I had just signed a termination agreement. The second party was Sean, my partner, and a brother of 8 years. My assistant pushed the door open, an odd expression on her face. "Sir, there's a woman downstairs, a woman who says she is your former artist." The tip of my pen paused. Former artist. Those two words rolled over my tongue like swallowing like shards of glass. I put the pen down and leaned back in my seat. Let her come up. 3 minutes later, the office door swung open. Iris stood at the doorway. Camel coat, cascading waves, her makeup so impeccable she might have been on her way to a red carpet. In her hand, she clutched a piece of paper, that 5-year binding agreement signed 3 years ago. At 22, when she signed this agreement, she was just a fresh graduate from the acting department. 3 years later, she won the Best Actress award. A year after that, she teamed up with Sean to kick me out of the company I founded myself. And now, she stands before me again, with that agreement, as if nothing ever happened. She walks in, places the agreement on my desk, and taps it with her fingertip. "Harrison. The agreement hasn't expired yet. You can't unilaterally terminate it." Her tone is assertive, carrying the ease of someone who has everything under control. In my past life, I would have indeed halted all termination procedures just because of that one sentence from her. To boost her career, I directed all of my resources toward her. To help her win that Best Actress award, I poured half of the company's liquid assets into PR campaigns. And what did I get in return? On the night of the award ceremony, she stood on stage, holding the trophy, thanking Sean, thanking the director, thanking all the collaborators. But she never thanked me. The flashbulbs below the stage flickered in a sea of light. Sean, sitting in the front row, smiled with a meaningful look. After the celebration party ended that night, Iris and Sean didn't go home. The hotel surveillance footage is on my phone. I had hired a private investigator to get it. In the footage, the two of them pushed open the same hotel room door, walked in, and never came out. The next day, I received a notice from the board of directors. Sean, in collaboration with the capital backing Iris, used a carefully crafted equity transfer trap to oust me from the company. My 47% stake was diluted to less than a negligible amount due to hidden clauses in a supplemental agreement. When I signed, I saw clearly the signature on that supplementary agreement. It was my own. Signed 3 months ago. That day, Iris came to me in tears, saying someone was spreading false rumors about her online. I trusted her. I trusted Sean. In that crisis management authorization letter, they slipped in an extra page with supplementary equity transfer clauses. I didn't read it. Signed it. Looking back now, that version of myself, so foolish enough to make me want to tear that page to shreds. But I didn't shreds it. Instead, after the inevitable defeat in that battle for equity control, I drove to under Iris's apartment building. It rained that night. She wasn't home. I sat in my car waiting the entire night, waiting for her to come back, wanting to ask her why. Just before dawn, Sean's car drove out of the community. In Sean's car out of the complex. Iris was sitting in the passenger seat, leaning back with her eyes closed. Sean's hands rested on the steering wheel. She was fast asleep. I sat there, motionless, watching the taillights of that car fade into the distance at the end of the street. At that moment, I called the insurance company. I had bought her an accident insurance for accidental injury. I was the beneficiary. In the last 3 months of my previous life, I used every channel available to me. Spent a sum of money. Made a part on that car fail at a specific point in time. I didn't even do it myself. I just paid, and then waited. 3 months later, on the way home from a night scene, Iris's car crashed through the highway guardrailings on the overpass. The police ruled it as a vehicle malfunction. It was raining heavily that day. The road was slippery, visibility was low visibility. Everyone believed it was an accident. No one suspected me. Then at her funeral, I watched Sean weep uncontrollably. I went over and patted his shoulder. He patted mine back. Like two companions comforting each other. The night the funeral ended, I swallowed half a bottle of sleeping pills in my apartment. I closed my eyes. When I opened them, I was back to today. And she came back too. Only she didn't know that I had also returned. She only knows how much I loved her in our past life, how willing I was to give everything for her. So she came with that agreement, certain that I would let her renew the contract and continue supporting her, just like before. I looked at the agreement and said nothing. 5 seconds passed. I reached out and picked it up. The corner of Iris's mouth twitched slightly. I folded the agreement in half, then in half again. Iris exclaimed, "Harrison, you." The shredded pieces of paper fell onto the black tabletop, like scattered ashes. Iris's expression froze. A smile still lingered at the corners of her mouth, but the light in her eyes cracked little by little cracked. She took a half step back. I lifted my eyes to look at her, my voice flat. "Iris. The agreement is void. The company has nothing to do with you anymore." "Impossible." She shook her head. Quickly. You couldn't have done this to me. In your past life, no, before." She slammed on the brakes. She almost let it slip. Her past life. She didn't want me to know she had also been reborn. Such naive confidence. She thought she was the only one who had returned from the future. She thought all the advantages were in her hands. Her hands. I watched her frantically compose herself, forcing another smile. "Harrison, you're joking, right? We signed a 5-year contract. You can't unilaterally terminate it. Legally, you can sue me." I stood up, walked around the desk, and approached her. She instinctively looked up at me. This vantage point of looking down, I'd never used it in my past life. I always crouched down to talk to her. In this life, I enjoy seeing her look up like that. Like a butterfly with its wings pinned down. "Iris, when I say the contract is terminated, it's terminated. The penalty fee will go through the company's finances. Starting today, you have no contractual relationship with us. Give me a reason." She bit her lip, her eyes reddening eyes red. "A reason? You took my Best Actress award and then went to a hotel room with Sean. You teamed up with outsiders to kick me out of the company I built myself. On that rainy night, I waited for you the whole night, only to see you leaning against Sean's shoulder with your eyes closed eyes. Which one do you want to hear?" But I didn't say it. "There's no reason," I said lightly. Her voice began to tremble. "You can't possibly be like this. You used to, you once said that as long as I wanted it, you would give me anything." I did say that. In my past life, I really did say it. It was at the celebration banquet after she won her first Best Newcomer award. I had too much to drink. Holding her hand, I said, "Iris, whatever you want in the future, I'll give it to you." She smiled so sweetly back then. Later, she did come to ask. She took the company, she took my heart, and in the end, she took my life. "People change," I said. Then I walked past her to the door, pulled it open, and said, "See our guest out." Iris stood there, not moving. She clutched the torn pieces of the agreement, her knuckles white. Her shoulders trembled. From anger. She had never been treated like this by me before. In her memory, Harrison was the one who held her in the palm of his hand, the one who staked the entire company on her. She thought that returning from the dead, all she had to do was show up with the agreement, and everything would go back to how it was. What a pity. She didn't know, the Harrison who loved her in her past life had already died, completely and utterly, on the signing table of that equity transfer. "You'll regret this." She paused at the doorway, turning her head to look at me. Her eyes were red, but no tears fell. Stubborn. Ruthless. Just like 3 years ago. "No, I won't," I said. She left. The heels of her shoes struck the marble floor, a rapid rhythm, fast, fast, fast. I closed the door. Walked back to the desk and sat down. stared at the shredded pieces of paper. That agreement, in my past life, I had locked it in the company safe, keeping it as a memento. Now, looking at its fragments, I felt only one thing. No hatred, no pain. Just emptiness. Like the foundation left behind after a house has been completely torn down. It was fine. Chapter 2. Iris wasn't the type to be defeated by a single rejection. I had learned that in my past life. She could sleep with Sean on the night she won the Best Actress award, then come back to me the next day and call me, darling, as naturally as ever. That showed her skin was thick and her mental fortitude top-notch. So she would come back. Just in a different way. The next day. I was in a meeting at the company when my phone rang. It was Sean. Harrison, let's grab dinner tonight. It's been a while since we hung out. His voice was still so warm and familiar. As if the termination agreement signed half a month ago had never happened. In my past life, by this time, he should have already been conspiring with Iris to edge me out. In this life, he was changing his approach. Okay. After hanging up the phone, I leaned back in my chair. Outside the window was the gray November sky. Hank knocked and came in, handing me a cup of coffee. Sir, I've arranged a car for dinner with Sean tonight. No need, I'll drive myself. Hank is someone I've been working with since I started the business. In my previous life, he voluntarily resigned after I was forced out of the company. Later, he worked in administration at a small company and didn't fare particularly well. In this life, he won't have such a hard time. Hank hesitated for a moment before speaking up, Sir, there's something. Speak. On Iris's end, she posted a personal update last night. She vaguely mentioned being betrayed by someone and many people in the industry commented below, with a few directors even reposting it. The public sentiment isn't trend. I took a sip of coffee. No response. But. I set down the cup and said, Hank. Don't give any response. Let the dust settle for a while. He looked at me. There was a flicker of barely concealed confusion in his eyes. But he didn't ask again. He trusted me. That trust had taken me 7 years to earn in our last life, and I was cashing it in this one. 7 in the evening. Private club. Sean had booked a private room, ordered a table full of dishes, and opened 2 bottles of wine. He sat across from me, smiling as warmly as a spring breeze. What's been going on with the company lately? I heard you put a few projects on hold. Restructuring, I said. Restructuring what? Wasn't Iris perfect for our new film project? She's been trending lately. I cut him off. Not suitable. Sean's hand, holding the chopsticks, paused for a moment. Why? No reason. He put down his chopsticks and looked at me seriously. Harrison, did you hear something? Those things online. Sean. I picked up the glass, didn't drink, just swirled it. He looked into my eyes. That gaze was different from how it was in the previous life. When I used to look at him, I felt they were reliable eyes. Now they appear, shrewd, calculating, with a shell thicker than mine. As for Iris, I've said it's not a match. Don't bother yourself with this either. Wasn't I thinking about the company's good? About my good, or your own good? The air was silent for 2 seconds. Sean's expression didn't change, but his hand holding the glass paused. What do you mean by that? After drinking that glass of wine, I said, nothing much. Let's eat. The atmosphere at the second half of the meal had a bit of a heavy atmosphere. Sean kept talking about the project, about opportunities, about the actress Iris has a promising future. I listened, nodded, but didn't respond. I knew he was paving the way for Iris. I also knew what Iris said to him behind the scenes. It was nothing more than, Harrison suddenly turned for no reason, you have a chance to say a few good words for me. Sean, in his past life, managed to get together with Iris for the same reason as me, he wanted something from her. For me, it was feelings. For him, it was benefits and the desire for conquest. The only difference is that he was more clear-headed than me and didn't fall into it. No, he fell into it too. On the day of the car accident, he was in the passenger seat and died as well. He just didn't get reborn. So he doesn't remember. After the meal in the parking lot, Sean leaned against the car door, smoking. Harrison, won't you really consider it? That girl Iris, she's beautiful and a good actress, she can make big money for the company. I pulled open the car door. If you think she's good, go ahead. He froze. What do you mean? Exactly what I said. I bent down, got into the car, and started the engine. Before closing the door, I glanced at him. But Sean, before you sign her, you'd better think twice. About what exactly? Think clearly whether she's worth getting involved with. When the car drove off, Sean was still standing in place in the rearview mirror. The cigarette was pinched between his fingers, unmoving for a long time. I don't care what he's thinking. The bait has already been cast. Iris is the bait. Iris is the lure. Sean is the fish. An angler 2 lives by manipulation. In the previous life, it took them a year for them to truly conspire. In this life, because I'm no longer the wall standing in between, it will be quicker. And all I have to do is watch. Watch them think they've already won. Watch them sink deeper and deeper. Then, at the most opportune moment, give a gentle push. Chapter 3. Iris indeed has no intention of letting me go. 3 days later, an investor we'd partnered with for 5 years suddenly showed up. Demanded to withdraw their capital. That project was our S-Class major production of the year, with the investor holding a 40% share. Withdrew just like that. Their reason was very official: group strategic adjustment, film and television sector is as adjusting, scaling down. I got Hank to investigate. The answer came back that very night. The head of risk control at that investment firm had dinner with Iris's father last week. Iris's family is in the building materials business. In her previous life, after she rose to fame, I helped her clean up all the messy debts her father had racked up. In this life, she's clearly using the same tactic of creating trouble. She sinks my project, then steps in with her father's resources to fix things. After that, she seizes the opportunity to demand a contract renewal, just like last time. First, she tears down my home, then plays the savior. Too bad. The Harrison of the previous life would have been tearfully grateful. Not this time. I made 3 phone calls. The next day, less than 24 hours after the news of the investor's withdrawal spread, I secured a new source of funding even faster. Not only did I cover the gap, but I also secured an additional sum. The other party was a rising company in the industry. The person in charge was named Cindy. When discussing cooperation with me, she said something left a lasting impression: Harrison, word is you've been downsizing lately. I don't ask gossip, just the profit margin of the project in your hands. I gave her the number. She signed straight away. It took less than 2 hours from start to finish. The news reached Iris's ears by noon of the 3rd day. I was eating a takeout at my desk when my phone rang. It was Iris's number. She called from a new one. I answered. Harrison. Where did you get the money to fill that gap? Did you take from the company? The voice was frantic and sharp, cracking. What I do is none of your business. You and I no longer have any contractual relationship. You can't do this. That project was originally. Originally what? I didn't let her finish. Was I supposed to beg you to come save the day? The other end of the line suddenly went quiet. She knew I had seen through her little tricks. Harrison, you've changed. You said the same thing. You said the same thing 3 minutes ago. Before, you never would have. Before. I repeated those 2 words. I said them lightly, like tasting a bone with little flavor. Iris's breath stopped over the phone. She was afraid of letting something slip again. Afraid I would find out she had also reincarnated. How ridiculous. She thought her little secret was a massive advantage. Iris, I'll say this one last time. Stop messing with my projects. Next time, my counterattack won't just be changing the investor. Are you threatening me? No, I'm reasoning with you. I hung up. The phone landed on the table. The boxed lunch had gone cold, I pushed it aside. Hank came in with a cup of hot tea and set it by my hand. Sir, about Iris's father. What did you find? Iris's father took on a government renovation project 3 years ago. The spot check report for the materials he used had issues. The quality inspection stamp on that batch of goods was forged. I took a sip of tea. Set it aside for now. What? Set it aside? Yeah. Keep it under wraps. Don't let the news get out. Hank shot me a glance. That look told me, he probably had a pretty good idea of what I was waiting for. But he didn't ask. Working under the right boss sometimes isn't about asking everything, but about knowing everything. Chapter 4. A week later. Iris and Sean's interactions began to surface. First, someone spotted them eating at the same restaurant. Then Sean posted a photo on social media with a blurred silhouette of a woman in the background, which netizens identified as Iris. The comments exploded. Isn't Iris signed with Harrison's company? She terminated her contract a long time ago. Ending a contract and immediately getting involved with Sean? That's way too fast. Isn't Sean Harrison's business partner? This relationship is a bit messy. Speculation began to brew. Some were guessing about the relationship between Iris and Sean, others were guessing why I ended my contract with Iris. Reporters were camped outside the company for days. Hank came to ask me, do you want to issue a statement? Don't send it. But. Let Sean send it. Hank was taken aback for a moment. Then he understood. If Sean issued a statement, no matter what he said, it would solidify his relationship with Iris. By then, everyone would know that he had taken someone I didn't want. It would be like labeling himself as a scavenger. The next day. Sean indeed posted. Iris and I have been close friends for years. I hope everyone won't overthink this. This statement, as it stands, is essentially no explanation at all. It even invites even more speculation. The savvy ones in the circle got it, Sean was backing Iris. And as for Iris, after being rejected by Harrison, turned around and went for Harrison's partner. Someone quietly messaged to me, did you get cheated on? I didn't respond. Cheated on? That belonged to the last life. In this life, they haven't gotten there yet. But they're close. Day 5. I received an anonymous package. I opened it, and inside were a stack of photos. Sean and Iris in the hotel underground parking lot. The timestamp was from 2 days ago. The photos were very clear. The two of them were leaning against the car, talking closely, with ambiguous expressions. I don't know who took it, and I don't plan to find out. It's probably someone Iris has recently offended in her circle, and someone wants to use me to get back at her. Or maybe it's just some nosy paparazzi who snapped the picture, tried to sell it around, no one bought it, and finally sent it to me. Whoever it is. I'll keep this card. No rush to use it. Chapter 5. Iris and Sean's relationship has progressed faster than I expected. 2 weeks. They're no longer hiding it. Sean has started taking her to dinners, introducing her to investors, and at one private party, someone saw Sean with his hand resting on Iris's waist. When the news reached me, it was Friday afternoon. Hank placed the photos from the informant on my desk. A Western restaurant. Candlelight. Red wine. Iris wore a little black dress, smiling with restraint. Sean's hand rested on the table, his fingers lightly touching the back of hers. I glanced at it, then turned the photo over. Is Sean at the company today? Yes, there's a meeting at 3 p.m. Tell him to come to my office after the meeting. Okay. It was 4:30 in the afternoon. Sean pushed the door open and walked in. There was a smile on his face, and hiding within it was a hint of hesitation. What's up? It's rare for you to come to me on your own. Have a seat. He sat down on the sofa and crossed his legs. Sean, you've been getting pretty close with Iris lately. The smile on his face paused for a moment. Friends, huh? I terminated the contract with her. I know that. So. I looked at him. If you sign her, I don't care. If you have any personal relationship with her, I won't ask. Sean stared at me. He was assessing me. Trying to figure out if I was being sarcastic. If I still had lingering feelings. If there was something else hidden beneath my calm demeanor. Harrison, are you really okay with this? Why would I care? You used to. The past is the past. I stood up and walked over to the window. Outside, the November sky was a grayish blue. Sean, I have only one thing to say. Go ahead. Before you sign her, think it through. Whether she, this person, is worth betting your current path for. Sean laughed. Harrison, the way you say that. I turned to look at him. It's not a warning. It's a reminder. He stood up and walked to the door. His hand paused on the doorknob. Harrison, are you still not over her? I didn't answer. He waited 3 seconds, then pulled the door open and left. The moment the door closed, the corner of my mouth twitched. It wasn't a smile. Just a curve. The fish had taken the bait. Chapter 6. Another week passed. Iris began looking into something. That car accident. The overpass where she had her accident in her past life, the dashcam footage from that night, the maintenance records. She was digging. She wanted to know why that car had crashed. The informant's message came back that night as I sat on the balcony. A cup of tea in my hand had gone cold, untouched. She was starting to suspect. This is the aftermath of rebirth. You come back to life carrying the memory of a death, and you can't help but want to know how it happened. She was looking for the killer. But she was in the wrong direction. The she suspected was Sean. Because back then, the car was and the driver was arranged. She thought Sean her. As for the reason, either of uneven profits, or Sean afraid she had leverage hold over him. She considered, but never me. Because in her memory, Harrison was the one who gave everything for her. He was the one who staking his entire fortune on her. He was the one who would never and could never wanted to hurt her. The more confident she was confident, the easier it was for her to overlook the most obvious answer. That was her weakness. I advantage of that. In my life, with love and in this her. Chapter 7. 3 days later. Came to me. Was a bit. Harrison, with. He said with eyes. Same he finally me down control of company in my. Congratulations, I said. You really? Are you really not bothered? Why should I waste energy on something that which has nothing to do with me? Before. Let's not talk about the past. He laughed. It was a very relaxed laugh. Iris has been asking me some really strange questions lately. My heart stirred. I didn't show it on my face. What's the question? Sean crossed his legs and said, she asked about my old car. She said she dreamed of falling off that car and asked if there was something wrong with the brakes. He furrowed his brows slightly as he said this. I told her that car was sold long ago. Where could the brake issue come from? She just stopped talking. She's been under a lot of pressure lately. Sean nodded. You think so too? Ever since she won the Best Actress award these past few years, she's really become more and more neurotic. I looked at him. He had no idea what Iris was probing for. Didn't know that in the past life, he was on that car too. Had died once, but hadn't come back, so couldn't remember. Was both his fortune and his. I said, don't take it too personally. Women, they get a little emotional. Sean chuckled. Harrison, if you had always thought so openly, you wouldn't have ended up. He stopped. What wouldn't it come to? Wouldn't it come to loving Iris so much that he'd sacrifice himself? Wouldn't it come to being kicked out of the company by the two of us? He had no idea how ironic the latter part of those sentences was. He stood up and patted me on the shoulder. All right, I'm off. Let's grab a drink another day. Sure. After he left, I sat in the office for a long time. The sky outside had gone completely dark. The tea had gone cold, so I poured it out. Sean and Iris. One was charging ahead, the other was looking back. Two people sharing a bed but dreaming different dreams. And I stood outside the mirror, waiting for them to walk up to it and see themselves. Chapter 8. Iris found a clue. That car had been taken to a repair shop a week before the accident. The maintenance record stated, routine service. The appointer column was blank. The payment method was cash. There was no identifying information. But Iris didn't give up. She began to contact the people at the repair shop privately, asking if anyone had touched the car during that time. When the informant sent back this message, it was 1 a.m. I hadn't slept yet. Sitting at my desk, I flipped through a book I was halfway through. After reading the message, I placed my phone face down on the table. She was getting closer. But the direction she was approaching from was wrong. She thought that cash was paid by Sean. She thought Sean had arranged something behind the scenes. She even started collecting Sean's spending records from that period. How clever. And how terribly wrong. The next day, Iris came to see me. Not at the company, not downstairs from my apartment. It was at the gym I usually go to. She was wearing a gray hoodie, her hair tied up, and a mask. But those eyes, I recognized them from 3 meters away. Harrison. I stopped in my tracks. How did you know I was here? It was checked. She said it without any pretense. Get to the point. I want to ask you something. She took off her mask. Complexion was pale, with dark shadows under the eyes, no lipstick on. She looked. Go on. Stared into my eyes. 3 years ago. Did you went to that repair shop one time? The air froze for 2 seconds. I kept a blank expression. Which repair shop? Her voice trembled slightly. Stop pretending. Someone saw you around there during that time. And then. She didn't finish. Of course she didn't finish. Because she had no such thing as, someone saw, at all. She was testing. Using a fabricated piece of information to gauge my reaction. She wanted to know if something was wrong with me. But she didn't dare to truly suspect me. Because the moment she suspects me, her belief that Harrison loves me like crazy would crack. She can't afford that crack. So she can only use these ambiguous words to test me. I twirled the car keys in my hand and said, Iris. You came to me just to ask which repair shop I went to 3 years ago. She bit her lip. You terminated our contract, rejected me, and did a complete 180-degree turn in attitude. You think I wouldn't think about anything? That's your prerogative. So did you go or not? I looked into her eyes. The same eyes that made me willingly give everything in my past life. Now, all I saw in them was anxiety and unwillingness. I went, I said. Iris's pupils suddenly contracted. What did you do? Changing the tire. That car had a slow leak in the left rear tire back left wheel. The repair shop is close to the shop to the company, so I can drop it off on the way. I said casually. She stared at me searching she for was any looking signs lie. Of in her she'll find let find her let find. She but won't. In life last that time, brake line I touched didn't do it myself. I the paid mechanica at shop little, to swap out of replace just the courtesy replace one change it. Left the next day mechanic for flew abroad, enough flew to 3 abroad years, money with lasted him. All the clean traces up time. I so were and by money before by accumulated money and now, could an I and say and confidently foul, I and was there, I changed tire. Believe it or not. I turned and opened the car door. Harrison, she called my name. I tilted my head. What? The evening wind poured into the garage. Her voice was slightly scattered by of it. Her eyes. Inside them, I saw hesitation, fear, desperation. She was reaching out to me. She wanted to whether I would catch her. In his past lives Harrison would kneel down and hug her, saying, "What's wrong? Did you have a nightmare this life's?" Harrison says. Iris. You've been with Sean lately. She froze for a moment. Then don't go saying things about death in front of your former boss. If word gets out, it won't be good for you. I got into the car. Started the engine. In the rearview mirror, she stood there, hands hanging limp, shoulders hunched inside her hoodie. Like a skeleton stripped of its bones. As I drove off, I didn't look back. But I knew, she believed it. She believed I'd been to the repair shop to change the tires. She ruled me out. And then she piled all her suspicion back onto Sean. How nice. The path I paved for her, how steadily she walked it. Chapter 9. 2 weeks later. Iris did one thing. She got a screenshot of a transfer record from 3 years ago belonging to Sean. The amount was small, $50,000. The recipient was the repair shop owner's personal account. I had this screenshot delivered to her via an anonymous email, with one line, "Does this name look familiar to you?" She didn't hesitate. With this piece of information, she went to find Sean. The location was Sean's apartment. My people were in the next room. The entire conversation was recorded. On the recording, Iris's voice was as cold as ice that hadn't melted in winter. "Sean. The brakes on that car, you were the one who tampered with them." Sean said, "Are you crazy? What car? What brakes?" "That car from 3 years ago. The one I was in. The one you arranged for me." "Iris, what on earth, what are you talking about? That car already. You transferred $50,000 to the repair shop owner." Silence. Then Sean's heavy breathing grew heavier. "What 50,000? What's repair?" Iris him, picking up for him, $50 in repair fee. Why didn't a bigger number? That's the project payment. I have other business dealings with that boss. What business could you possibly have with him? You're in film and television, and he's a mechanic. She stopped. Because she realized that when Sean said, project payment, his tone didn't sound like he was making it up. That 50,000 was indeed a legitimate transfer. But the information she sent, that screenshot, only captured the amount and the payee, not the memo field. She didn't know the memo read, "Old renovation project consulting fee." It was the same project as her father's batch of substandard building materials. What a coincidence. I had the entire trail handed to her. She thought she had uncovered the truth. In reality, she was just walking down the path I had paved for her. Sean's voice deepened. "Iris. Did you come today just to check my accounts? I just want to know about the car accident 3 years ago." "What 3 years? Snap out of it. Tell me, what year is it today?" He started shouting. Then he suddenly stopped. Because he realized Iris was talking about 3 years ago, 3 years ago that hasn't happened yet. She had slipped up. The recording fell into a long silence. Then Sean's voice changed. It became calm, grew calm, even a little cold. "Iris, you can see the future." Silence again. Longer silence. Iris didn't deny it. Sean asked again. I turned off the recording. Leaned back in my chair. The corner of my mouth curled up. It wasn't a smile. It was the silent arc of the moon rising to the center of the night sky. Chapter 10. Sean came to see me the following night. He was trembling all over. Not from fear. From excitement. He burst into my study, reeking of alcohol. "Harrison. Iris is reborn. She's been here in her past life." I put down the book in my hand. "What did you say?" She slipped up. She thought something happened to that car in her past life, she thought I was going to kill her. He let out a laugh. Harrison, do you know what this means? She can see the future. So what? So she's a goldmine. Sean paced back and forth in the study. She knows which project will blow up next year, which stock will rise, which director will make it big. You want to use her? He stopped and looked at me. Why not? You don't want her anymore, so why shouldn't I get something out of her? Sean. I interrupted him. He looked at me. Are you sure she's the only one who's been reborn? The air froze. Sean's eyes widened little by little. The tipsiness was shattered by those words. You. I didn't say anything. I just looked at him. The same gaze as in that meeting room 3 years ago. In that second, he understood everything. He took a step back, his knee bumping into the bookshelf. The books wobbled but didn't fall. Harrison, you too. Emicham. One word. Like a pebble dropped onto a frozen lake. Sean's lips began to tremble. When did you find out? From the very beginning. Then you know that your affair with Iris. What you conspired about in your past life. The equity transfer of equity. I know everything. He backed against the wall, one hand gripping the bookshelf, knuckles turning white. Harrison, he stammered through the words. Don't bother explaining. I rose from my feet in front. He was half a head shorter than me, at this distance his face at me. In the past life, the equity transfer agreement in the same face. At contempt. I had someone snap it in a voice so light it sounded like I softly. You and her, together. I took half a step back. Turning around, I walked back to the desk and sat down. But I didn't call you here today to rehash old grudges. Sean leaned against the wall, like a piece of plaster stripped of its rebar. Leave, I said. I've already signed the documents. Your shares in the company will be handled at market price. Starting tomorrow, you have nothing to do with this place anymore. He opened his mouth. Not a single word came out. I said out. I opened the book. But remember, never touch Iris again in this life. Otherwise, the next break line, I can't guarantee whose car it will be swapped onto. This is not a threat. It's a notice. Sean staggered to his feet and headed for the door. As his hand touched the doorknob, he looked back at me. There was so much in his eyes, fear, regret, confusion. He wanted to ask, why didn't you kill me? But he didn't dare. The door opened. Light poured in from the hallway. His silhouette disappeared into the light. The sound of footsteps grew fainter, just like that rainy night 3 years ago. On that rainy night, when I sat in the car watching him drive out of the apartment complex, the sound of his tires rolling through the puddles. The same fading away. I closed the book. The moon outside the window was full. Chapter 11. 3 days later, Iris came to see me. She didn't go to the office, she didn't go to the gym, and she didn't come to my place. She went to that overpass, the one she fell from 3 years ago. I don't know how she found her way there, maybe Sean told her something, or she might have pieced it all together, all the fragments herself. That evening, I was returning from a set in the west end of the city. As I drove over the highway, I saw her car. She standing at the railing. The wind was fierce. Late November, and the wind cutting across face like razors. Her hair was windblown, wrapped in a black down jacket. She huddled into a tiny bundle. I stopped the car. Walked over. Stopped 5 steps away from her. She heard the footsteps and turned around. That face, no tears, no hysteria. Just emptiness, as everything drained away. Harrison. The wind fractured her voice. I stood still and didn't move. She looked at me. Sean is gone. He told me. You've also been reborn. I didn't deny it. It was you all along. As she said this, the corner of her mouth even twitched slightly. The engagement was broken off by you. Sean was pushed by you. That 50,000 yuan transfer record was handed over by you as well. Yeah. You just wanted to see me make a fool of myself. It's not about seeing you make a fool of yourself. I walked over to the railing. The wind poured into my collar, chilly. It's to make you realize what you did 3 years ago. Iris's shoulders began to tremble. 3 years ago. I turned to look at her. That night of the awards ceremony. When the celebration party ended, you went to the hotel with Sean at the hotel. She closed her eyes. You know. The next day's equity transfer. You signed the documents with him. It wasn't me, it was my father who forced me. You signed it. She opened her mouth. Not a single word came out. You thought being reborn could let you start over. I turned to face her. You think that by coming back with memories from a past life, you can pretend those things never happened? She took a step back, she took a step back, her back against the icy railing. I just wanted to start over. Do you want to start over? Did you ask me? The wind rushed through the underpass of the bridge. Her tears finally fell. But I didn't feel ached for it anything. The Harrison who would have percent the wind blew under the bridge arch. Her tears finally fell. But I don't feel sorry for him. The Harrison who would have shed tears for her in his past life. Felt no pity. That Harrison from the past life who would have wept for her, he was already destroyed her with her own hands, had been destroyed by her own hands. I looked at her. Iris. I'm not killing you. Not killing you. Not because I'm merciful. She lifted her head. Her head. Face. I stepped back. Because you're not worth a second attempt from me. I turned and walked back to my car. Harrison, she called out behind me. Harrison, you can't do this, you can't take everything away. I didn't stop. I didn't take anything. I pulled open the car door and said, tilting my head. Everything you had in your past life, everything that was given you. I'm not this time either. The door closed. The engine started the rearview mirror, Iris leaned against the guardrail, slowly sliding down. The wind, her hair into a mess, her mouth was still opening, but I couldn't hear her anymore. I withdrew my gaze and looked at the straight bridge ahead. 3 years ago, this road was her end. In this lifetime, it is my beginning. The wind pours in through the car window. I take a deep breath. My heart feels light, lighter than any other day in this lifetime. It's not about forgiveness. It's about letting go of myself. The car crosses the bridge and merges into the city's traffic. The phone rang. It was Hank. Sir, Cindy's side is asking about the signing time tomorrow. At 10 in the morning. All right. Also, someone has started asking about Iris's father's renovation project. Don't worry about it. Not at all. Right, none of it. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Understood. I hung up. Those cards I held, no longer needed. She got what she deserved. Heavier than any commercial sanction. She learned the truth. Knew that the one she had pushed away was the only person who ever truly loved her. Knew that the second chance she prided herself on was, from the very beginning, just a pawn on someone else's chessboard. That collapse of perception, 1,000 times more bitter than bankruptcy. A red light ahead. I stopped the car. Leaned back in my seat and closed my eyes for a moment. In my mind, there was no Iris, no Sean, no company from 3 years ago, no contracts, no equity transfer agreements. Just the road ahead. The green light came on. I pressed the accelerator. The car crossed the intersection and merged into the night. Like a drop of water falling into the sea. No one could see it anymore. But I knew it was still there. Just no longer surging for anyone,